Welcome, everyone, to the webinar Leadership in a Loosely Coupled Multi-Stakeholder System, Leading the Collective Will. And a real quick little background on the Mid-America PTTC. Now, we are tasked with providing substance misuse prevention, training, and technical assistance throughout Missouri, Iowa, Nebraska, and Kansas. Now, this means strengthening and supporting organizations' efforts to implement evidence-based prevention strategies, ultimately promoting safe, healthy, and drug-free communities across the region. Now, if you've been in prevention for any length of time, you've probably heard folks say the key to effective substance misuse prevention is collaboration. But here at the Mid-America PTTC, we're striving for something stronger than collaboration. That's just the act of working together to create or produce something. We want community. We want that fellowship with others. We've got the same interests, the same values, the same goals. From that rural one-person prevention team to a county coalition, all the way up to state level leadership, we're all on the same team. And the more we come together to support each other on our mission of prevention, we can each make our communities a little bit safer and a little bit healthier. At our core, we believe that prevention is better together and that together we are stronger. Now, we're housed at ACT Missouri, and ACT Missouri has been serving the substance misuse prevention field at the grassroots level for nearly 30 years. They believe in community. It's who we are. We want to take just a quick moment and reflect on the power of words. We're all prevention leaders in our teams, in our communities, and in our field. Together, we can use our words to create positive change. And a few little highlights about some of our upcoming events as well. Our partners at Hugh Life will be back on August 2nd for a quick learn on how to quickly brainstorm solutions to an issue. The workshop's going to offer a tool that will help your team clarify the issue and make an informed decision on how to resolve it quickly. Then, of course, because we do believe prevention is better together, we've got our TTA provider community of practice coming up. And then that last one there, the Infinite Game Workshop. You'll be hearing us talk a little bit about Simon Sinek today. And this workshop is bringing one of his igniters to our region to talk about the infinite game and how that applies to prevention. Because in prevention, there's really no such thing as winning and losing. In the infinite game, there's only ahead and behind. So we're going to tap into how we can lead with an infinite mindset. All right, so that's our little intro. Now, I'm just about ready to hand this over to Irina, but y'all, if you have not learned or read her bio yet, let me just give you some highlights. Irina's the co-founder and CEO of Hugh Life. And if you've been involved in many of our PTTC services, you know they are an invaluable, just amazing partner. And they really work in training, facilitation, and consulting on a mission to educate, facilitate, and inspire engagement and meaningful action for the greater good of communities and organizations. Now, Irina was born in the USSR, and she spent the first half of her life in Russia, Crimea, and the Ukraine, then moved to the USA in 2002. Now, she's also co-founded a number of organizations and is currently a member of the Rotary Minnesota Change Management Network, International Society of Organizational Development and Change, and Technology of Participation Network. She recently completed her doctoral research on leadership in loosely coupled multi-stakeholder systems at the University of St. Thomas, Minneapolis. Her passion is for social justice and love for learning. And that's what drives her to create organizations that will continue to provide learning opportunities and experiences in the arena of systems change at all levels. Irina's a survivor, an entrepreneur, a fighter for justice and freedom, and her personal mission is to inspire action for the greater good for two reasons. She cares about the impact that she can personally make on the world, and because it's fun, of course. All right, well, without further ado, Irina, welcome to the stage. It is all yours.
Thank you, Dave. I really admire your stage voice too, and we'll use that throughout the presentation. So thank you for being the voice for introduction, but also for bringing voice of the participants of the research I'm about to share with the rest of you guys into this space. So as Dave already shared, my journey began in USSR in a very tightly coupled system, and then it collapsed in 1991. And I experienced in my early adulthood years, becoming an adult, becoming a woman, becoming a mother, living through chaos when there is nothing to hold on to. There is no system to trust. And so that began my journey. When I moved to United States, if you can flip Dave to the next slide, I was asking myself that question. How do I lead in a situation when there is no one specifically in charge, when there is no system structure to go by, when there are no rules, when there are multiple people coming together who need to be part of the decision making? You can't force anybody to do anything. You just need to be able to convene and help folks step in and take responsibility. So I really got interested in how does that happen? And I wasn't quite sure. I saw it happening around me. United States as a country in itself is a model for a loosely coupled system. And yet I was not being able to find specifically checklist of how does that happen? How can we teach somebody who comes from Soviet Union, who doesn't know how to live in a democratic, which is synonymous in my mind now to a loosely coupled system, when the people have the power, when the people have the voice, when the people are involved in decision making, how can we establish something more clear to help us understand how to lead in that environment? So that led to my interest to pursue my education career. What I did complete in Ukraine before moving to United States is a degree, master's degree in computer science and mathematics. And so that was cool. I loved mathematics, but I loved more than numbers, people. And I really wanted to help others learn. So when I moved to United States, I continued on that journey and decided to pursue my teaching license. However, life happened, and we can go into that story later, which led to my husband and I making a different decision. He was a city manager at the time, which was manager of Maplewood, where we live right now, which went through a political turmoil, let's put it this way. And so he was fired overnight. So he and I sat down and decided, okay, well, this is an opportunity to pair up and do something together. So we started our work. He signed up for a program at St. Thomas and continued his education in organization development. Once he was done, I started my journey. Watching him, watching us, doing different projects on this path of being consultants, I realized that nobody really still have the answers to this question. How does leadership occur in a multi-stakeholder system, in a loosely coupled system, where we're not necessarily expecting people to follow orders? And that included not just organizations like coalitions, that also included different networks, right? Organizations that don't have a legal form yet, who are coming together for a particular purpose to solve a particular issue, but they don't have a structure in place. And many of them are volunteers, and many of them have other jobs. So as we were working with communities in our consulting journey, if you will, helping council members and community members to get on the same page and develop strategies, we figured that, you know what, what's missing is helping those loosely coupled groups to sustain over time. They're good at forming, somebody calls attention to an issue, group is formed, they come to a council meeting, they complain, nothing gets done, and they kind of go away. And so that became another reason why this research question became the focal question for me as I was continuing my doctoral education here in the United States. So part of the journey, and you can go to the next slide, Dave, was also looking back. So the process, if you will, took 8+ years. It wasn't something that happened just in the last year and a half, because of the type of methodology I chose to use for this particular research project. So I'll look back to 2012 when my first trip back to Ukraine resulted in forming two nonprofit organizations, one in US and one in Ukraine, to support one another. This is where we, for the first time, went back and brought an idea to Ukrainian colleagues and counterparts about bringing Ukrainians and Americans together to learn from one another about how to build community, about leadership, about working at the local level and developing missions, visions, and strategies for community development and growth. So that started in 2012, and I had no idea what I was doing at the time. So basically, just wanting to do something and figured it out as we were going along, which then led to being involved with the organization Dave mentioned, Technology of Participation Network, and learning the methods that actually helped us do that work to put that mission and purpose into practice. And many of our courses today are based on that methodology, which you may be familiar with. That led to taking responsibility myself and stepping into leadership role when the founder of Minnesota Technology of Participation Training Company left and decided to retire, which I realized quickly, I'm not a traditional leader. I cannot do this. This is not for me. I don't want to do this. So it was really an eye-opening experience, which led for me to go into this journey for myself, use of self as a concept that it was introduced to by one of my professors at St. Thomas. And I spent a whole year really meditating and being coached and really understanding what do I need to unlearn in order to be effective in leading other people, that in essence, I did step up and took responsibility for, but I also was inheriting a whole lot of dynamics I had no clue how to navigate. And a lot of those dynamics had to do with people's ability to step away and not be part of that system or that group anymore. So then I launched Hue Life. So that's where the Hue Life concept was born in 2017. Merging our consulting group and the technology of participation team that was already established and transitioned during the last couple of years, and then expanding that to bringing more people on board, whom some of you know very well as part of our team now. So all of that to share with you, by the time the research proposal was written and accepted by St. Thomas in 2019, you can see all of the experiences and projects that have happened. That now I was able to go back and unpack and utilize in this particular research process that's called grounded theory. If you click on the next slide, Dave, you will be able to hopefully share. Oh, never mind. We will share next the purpose. But before we do, learning objectives for today is really explore the different point of view on leadership. As I mentioned, the mindset, the concept, the phenomena of leadership in itself, not just models and frameworks. And then from there, really take a look at those different levels and dimensions that showed up in my research that I hope bring some clarity as to how it happens. And then finally finish today with some competencies that I feel are necessary for us as leaders who lead in different way and systems that we intend to keep loosely coupled going forward. So the agenda is very simple: share the findings, take a look at the model, and then the leadership competencies discussion followed by Q&A. So the purpose, that's where I wanted to go next, is not necessarily to understand the phenomena of leadership, not necessarily develop a new model, not necessarily measure whether or not loosely coupled systems and leading them is effective, because there's plenty of that available in academia. And that is probably why there is this huge gap in our understanding how to lead loosely coupled system versus tightly coupled system. So I really focused on the how. And as I was doing that, the significance of that is not necessarily only related to loosely coupled systems. I also noticed that a lot of traditional hierarchical structures are trying to change. and loosen it up and give power back to employees or stakeholders, right? Share that power, and nobody knows how to do it. It sounds like we all want, in the end, the same thing: empower people to take decisions, and yet our behaviors suggest something different. And primarily because our leaders don't have the skills to make that happen. So, quote from the participants: Dave, bring your voice in.
Hey, all right. So I would have to say that there's more flexibility in loosely coupled systems. I would say that when you have a more structured leadership format, you don't hear from voices that represent a different contingency. You're hearing from the voices that you've identified.
That's the difference for me. Thanks, Dave. That's the significance. If we want to continue to hear from the same voices, we probably know how to do it well. If we need to challenge ourselves and bring diversity of thinking and make sure that we are considering other voices, that's where leading in a loosely coupled way becomes more critical, even though system might not be loosely coupled that you're part of. So with that, some of the elements that I hope helps you to understand what is included in this concept of multi-stakeholder loosely coupled system. First element is organization, just view of the organization as an open and not closed system, which is very different. If we're thinking of an organization as something that we need to control within internally, that probably not going to help you to view leadership in loosely coupled system the same as you would in closed system. So it has to be open to both flow of people, flow of information, and flow of resources, right? So you're interconnected with the external world, and things change and happen that you may or may not ever have control over. The loose coupling means that we are not necessarily policy driven and there is a process for everything, right? Loose coupling means that it's evolving, and in the moment, in the process of developing the system, things change organically. And it's not that clear. You look at the documents, you read the policies for the organization or bylaws. What's on paper oftentimes is not what's actually happening. So that's what loosely coupled means. Members are independent actors. So members of loosely coupled systems themselves could be other organizations, and individuals who represent those organizations change. So in many of those systems, you would have commitment from organizations being part of it. And the people who originally committed 10 years later are not the same people. So that brings a different dynamic. And then the last final element that served as a criteria for selecting these systems is when members represent various sectors. They're not all just from government. So this gives you an idea of what was included in terms of selection criteria for loosely coupled systems to answer this question, how leadership occurs. And then the questions on the left are helping, hopefully, for you to understand what kind of questions were asked of individuals who were identified as leaders within those systems. So going forward, some definitions that were shared in not only for my grounding in the research purpose, but also with participants themselves. And I would like to just pause here and give you a time to scan. But the most important one is leadership. Seeing leadership as not a relationship, not leader-follow relationship necessary. Seeing leadership as a number of people interacting in certain way, process, and structure, which allows for accomplishing a collective agenda or purpose toward a common good. So that is what I was looking for. Who are the people involved? How are they interacting? What kind of processes are they using, establishing consciously or not consciously? And what kind of structures that they are putting in place to accomplish their collective purpose agenda towards common good? And from there, you can see that the number of participants would be representing different types of organizations. These are the theories that were used to inform the research. Some of you are maybe familiar with some of them. They all had gaps. They were all limited to either a particular sector or a particular type of organization that they could be applied. Some of them have been challenged, and some of them have been already discounted, if you will. In terms of shared leadership theory, for example, is a great example here to share, because many of those shared leadership case studies and the research done on teams and groups that are considered groups of individuals who are not necessarily leaders, compared to what we're talking about here in a loosely coupled system. We're bringing leaders of other organizations together and trying to figure out how do they lead each other. They've already established and have positions of leadership someplace else, which is a very different concept. So the people who were involved, Dave, if you can give us probably next one. I already talked a little bit about grounded theory methodology, the fact that it's an iterative process and includes researchers' perspective, experience, and reflection, as well as other participants. And so it's constant comparison, memoing, observing, and documenting what's happening to me personally as I'm building those organizations, but also reflecting on how others do it. So you have a list here of 10 founding members, 6 participating, and 14 employees who were interviewed in depth for this particular research. And then on the next slide, you will see the types of organizations. Many of them are coalitions. So coalitions, alliances, partnerships, networks, leagues were those examples of loosely coupled systems. And some of them have been around for a little while, 1 year. And some of them have been around for more than 20 years. And some of those who have been around for 20 years remained loosely coupled. Others have become more tightly coupled and adapted different leadership models that exactly leads to what we know, hierarchy. So not every one of those systems was able to survive as a loosely coupled system in the end. And that begs a different question. How do we sustain loosely coupling now that we perhaps know how to lead it? So stay tuned for that next 2 years of research. So go next. Quote from the participant. So what does it mean to create a system like that, Dave?
Well, I think that it's like you bring together influence and some economic resources with a big idea, and that over time, that idea stands the test of time and is popular enough and people can envision it, then something can happen and it can continue to grow and evolve.
Great, thank you. I highlighted 2 key words here, which every participant in this research continues to use: bringing people together, bringing resources together, bringing something together. That's the focus of leadership in loosely coupled system. And then the second word is it. And it refers to either idea or idea now being mature enough and developed enough that it represents the system. So when people start talking about their organization in the third person like that, or it, that is where I would know as a researcher that they've successfully transitioned their power to something bigger than themselves. And they see the idea being able to sustain itself, right? And the system being able to continue on without them being part of it. So that was an interesting clue for me to look for as I was continuing to dig deeper and follow up with these questions. Once some of those key concepts were established from initial interviews, I went back to some of the participants and asked additionally the how questions, because if you remember, that was a key for us to understand at the beginning of this journey, not necessarily describing the leadership phenomena, but really how does that group of people make those decisions? How are those decisions coordinated? And how ultimately leadership occur in their minds? So that was a second layer that I needed to go into in order to really reveal some of those specific actions, activities, and processes that they got engaged in. So with that, I think you're ready. Enough of context. Let's use this quote as a transition to revealing what we found out.
Oh, we created a system that is win win for everyone. Members benefit from being members, and the organization itself benefits from all these members as a result.
Awesome. And that's the key word here, we. And sometimes we meant one person, but because they have a mindset of we and they continue to use language of we, really nobody knows who is in the end responsible specifically for that whole system, because the feeling in general that is not one person, even though it might be one who really started it, whose idea was initial idea to begin with. So going forward now, let's take a look at those dimensions. What I was able to do is to distill different activities in those 4 dimensions of leadership. And different people were formed in different groups with those dimensions present, no matter if it was at the beginning, at the middle stages of development, or when the system was mature. So, and they have to be present and balanced. So the 4 dimensions are the why. Why are we here? Why are we doing this? At the higher, if you will, whole system level, or at the very small element of it. It doesn't matter at which corner of the system itself, but that was an important piece to make sure it's clear. How are we doing this? And in all of those cases, the how was around partnership and collaboration. What is our product and who are the people? So if we can answer those questions, why are you doing it, who is doing it, how you're doing it, and what's your result, then we can see that there is leadership happening in that particular part of the system. So the 4 levels then are including all 4 of those dimensions, and it's not necessarily top down or right to left in terms of sequence of those 4 levels. They are happening simultaneously. So as you look at the next slide, you'll see the linear representation of it, but I wanted to point out it's not linear. Think about it as circular, dimensional. And I'll have a visual for you from my Russian heritage to hopefully get that different feeling of what that might look like. So, but for content purposes, level 4 is the broadest level. That's what's observable from the outside. And you can see the dimensions here and who is doing the work, the core group, who is really engaging, building structures, and concerned with sustainability. They are balancing chaos and order at the beginning as system develops, but also as it continues to mature. That group, core group, exists or existed in all of those systems that I was able to observe and interview people from, but also reflecting back on my own experience. The minute there is no clarity who is in that core group, chaos takes over. The minute one person steps in and takes on traditional leadership approach, which meaning hierarchical, top-down, executive director who knows only one way how to direct, then it becomes tightly coupled, right? And so in that situation, the system can either disappear, just people go, if they don't like how that particular core group functions, or they stay, and that's becoming a pivotal moment. Level 3 is how does that core group get established? Where do they come from? You can see that there is somebody else, coalition of the willing, who is stepping forward to form and sustain that leadership team. And it's one thing to form it, it's another thing to sustain it. Activities look different, but what they're concerned with articulating, developing, understanding, communicating shared values, shared interest, and shared power. So it's very important concept, and they need to be able to articulate that and maintain and model those behaviors that are embedded in those 3 dimensions. Then the layer deeper is that coalition of the willing, who is being formed by either one person, as I said before, or 2 or 3 people who call themselves the we at the very beginning and share that responsibility from the very beginning. Their job is to convene, to communicate, to have a compelling message, to sell that message to others, and to connect the dots. So their activities are all around inviting people to collaborate at the beginning and throughout. And then the first level of leadership is that we concept. It is about an idea holder or somebody who is bringing that idea forward to collaborate around. And that individual or different people share systems thinking, courage, and persistence. Again, taking responsibility is their action. Those are the key characteristics that I found being present in the individuals who did that kind of activity. And yet, level 1 doesn't mean the first step. It means that at level 4, at the system level, the desired outcome that anybody in that system can exercise level 1 leadership. Anybody can take responsibility, can bring the idea forward and organize the coalition around it, and then build a core group around it. And therefore, you have a new product, new program, or a new section. Something happens that continues to grow into its own arm, if you will. So that is the overview of the 4 levels and those 4 dimensions. So the next slide then, Dave, if you can, gives you a visual. My heritage, as I said, helped me here. It's like, it's not linear. It's not top down. It's not right, left. It's really the nesting doll, right? So you have the circles of people that are surrounding another group of people, and it's just getting stronger and stronger and stronger as you go out. And the outer ring cannot exist with the inner ring, but then it's one within another, not necessarily on top of each other. So let's challenge our thinking a little bit here and look at what we can observe. What we can observe oftentimes is the written statement around the purpose of the system. This is level 4. We're looking at processes, as you can see, that are helping individuals in the middle, people, processes of influence, processes of accountability, and processes of taking responsibility. So when the system is mature, when we are successfully able to develop the coalition and build the core group or leadership team and get to this particular level of system development, we are concerned with implementing those processes all the time, not one time and done. This is an ongoing maintenance. And what happens in each of those individual triangles, if you will, Dave, if you can click on our purpose first, how does that work look like? Leadership work at the system level where each person can exercise leadership and step up and take responsibility happens through aligning the passion. If you can click on that, Dave, you can see passion under purpose, then the vision and the plan. Keep clicking there. There you go. So you've got those 3 elements that need to be both developed, aligned, and connected to the purpose. And what happened to our passion? Click one more time. There you go. So those are the key elements of making sure that at the system level, the purpose is alive and that the purpose can be lived, right, and delivered on. Since our entire level 4 system level leadership is about serving that purpose, and it translates into a plan in the end. Once we have a plan, we can utilize that plan to influence. So our process of influence is based on shared plan, which then includes 3 elements of our partnership dimension. And in this case, you will see, you go the other way. Go ahead and click 3 times more. There we go. You'll see the elements there are relationships, trust, and voice. And when you think of those 3 in context of influence, you might be able to recognize some of the behaviors and reasons why people are willing or not willing to collaborate and partner. What I want to note here is the trust. Trust in this case is not the how, trust is the what. It's the currency that we need to continue to develop. And it happens through relationships. And the benefit of it is shared voice. When people come together in collaboration or partnership, they do it. Why? Because they couldn't do it alone. And so knowing that and remembering that, what the shared voice is, helps with influencing relationships, which in turn build trust. And once we have that, we can use processes of accountability to execute on the work that we agreed to do. In order to do that, you need expertise, resources, and shared benefit. So that is, in the nutshell, the outer ring, what we can observe, what we can see, what we can read, document, in terms of our ability to say, here is the elements of our leadership structure at level 4, and the people who are sharing responsibility around all of those elements. So our leadership job is to make sure that that happens. So next is going deeper into that core, the middle triangle, the who. So this is where we're going inside the nesting doll, the circle within the circle. That is our level 3 leadership, and that's called core group. If you click on that one more time. And so at that level, we're asking questions, what is the ability to, who has that ability? Identify needs, right? So sometimes systems are established for a good reason, and then over time, core group, if it takes over in a different way, in a more of a self-serving way, then the system exists no longer to serve the purpose, but to serve itself. We're chasing money, we're chasing opportunities to make sure that we sustain our system, but not necessarily accomplish our purpose. And then we're also within that core group are asking questions and really trying to understand how we're sharing that information and in terms of influence, because influence is very much connected to what we know, right? And how we share that information and with whom and when is a very important piece. Who talks to each other? Do we all hold responsibility for different relationships or not? And then, of course, how does the system knows what to do, right? So those are the questions that the core group asks themselves and continues to figure out a way to engage the rest of the members or actors. The key elements here is to focus on the work of engagement, building the structure, and the sustainability element, which is primarily around finances and resources. But sometimes more important is about skills in human resources. So looking at the next slide, you will see that with the core group specifically focusing on those 3 elements, can you click, Dave? We need to challenge ourselves as to how many people are able to be that person in charge, if you will, the leader who we usually go to for specific answers or specific affirmations. So let's challenge ourselves with this question. How many brains does the human have? Can you put in chat? What do you think?
Yes, put those responses in the chat and I will be your voice. How many brains does a human have? Give you a moment. Oh, we've got a 2 question mark, 2.
Yeah, maybe
Keep
2.
them coming. 3, we've got a 3.
Got a 3. Somebody Googled it already. I know.
Oh.
That was
it depends on what human you're talking about.
Exactly. So what an interesting fact. And of course, you can Google it and find out more if you find it interesting. But go ahead, Dave, and share the picture. We know already now medically, we have research and have finally, we have accepted the fact that humans have 3 brains. The first time this research was done, or this was discovered, was in early 70s, and medical community did not accept that and rejected that as a fact because of our traditional way of knowing what brain is. Not until late 90s, when this was rediscovered again, did we accept that as a known fact. And if you are curious, let's go ahead and look at what those 3 different brains are that leads us to a different understanding what the brain is in the first place. So the first brain is what we typically think of a brain. We know what it looks like. We know where it is. It's in our head. We know what it does. We can weigh it. We can measure it, right? So we can hold it on a scale. But what it really is responsible for is for processing and transmitting information. And many of us are familiar with what happens and how it happens. Most importantly, that brain gives us the ability to identify patterns and make sense of the world. Like that's how we create knowledge. The other two brains that were discovered are in different parts of our body. The second one is on our heart. And if we think of a brain that is the vehicle to transmit information, that particular brain communicates different type of communication. The heart sends as many messages to the head brain as it receives, and it has a different way of signaling and different type of thinking that occurs in that particular brain. And then the third brain lives in our gut. And this brain has a different purpose. The purpose and the communication that this brain is responsible for is all related to regulating our metabolism and controlling our blood pressure and assisting with memory formulation. So most of the work that happens in this brain happens during our sleep, when we sleep. So now we know that, and still, not many people know or accept that as a common belief, right? We're used to knowing that there's only one brain. So the reason I'm bringing it up is how difficult it is for us to change our mindset and the worldview and understanding of how things work. We're used to be thinking of leadership in one way. Now we're introducing a completely different view that is contradicting what we know. It's not one person, and it's not about leader-follower relationship. It's about creating a system of activities in which different people can interact and influence one another and hold one another accountable and achieve something together. So looking at the next slide. So what is the brain? It's not a singular body. It is any element of the body capable of learning, is the conclusion how we might define brain today. So looking at, again, and comparing it to what we're discovering here, leadership phenomena. Leadership is not one person or the follower leader relationship. So thinking about all these different elements collectively being present and working together in a way that system continues to sustain and accomplish the common agenda or common good. So I would like to unpack a little bit more core group, because that is where most of our work really, I think, happens, and where it either makes it or breaks it in terms of maintaining loosely coupling system as loosely coupled, or tidying it up and becoming more structured as we know how to lead and manage. So moving on with the core group, you will see, and Dave, go ahead and just continue because it's full of animations. Continue with clicking. The core group responsibilities are about building that structure, sustainability of the system, and engaging the rest of the stakeholders and members. So how does that happen? What are some of those activities within each of the element? The engagement process is really focusing on building community, collective ownership, and capacity of people. And who does that? Typically, it's a neutral facilitator. Oftentimes, it could be a person who is internal to that system, but most likely not. So having that role identified has been a key for those core groups that have been established in the scenarios I shared. In the structure, what does it mean to build a structure? Well, the structure is being built organically. Scaffolding was earlier concept that some people were sharing with me. And what's included in that is making sure that the why of the structure, which is accountability, is present. So we're not just building structure for the structure's sake, because the legal documents should be devised a certain way. We are a 501c3 and we need a board and we need blah, blah, blah. So that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about what is our work, who are the people we're working with, and what structure would make sense for them. But the purpose of developing it is the accountability. So if we're building a structure for the purpose of accountability, then we need to figure out how to monitor progress and what kind of framework will work. So who is responsible for that? Usually teams and working groups. Those are the kind of language, if you will, and definitions that people have been using in defining who does that work. Not one person. Somehow organically, teams are formed, working groups are formed, and that's what they're concerned with: identifying, establishing framework, developing monitoring progress, and making all that happen towards accountability. And then in the sustainability element, the why we are actually having this system built in the first place is the work is concerned with coordination, getting things done, and formalizing relationships. And why this is important is because everybody has the power to walk away. And if everybody has the power to walk away, they need to see some visible results. If they don't see it, interest kind of weighs out. If work is not coordinated, if people are not clear who is doing what by when, they can't find a place. And formalizing relationships has to do with both individual interests and organizational benefits. So making sure that we clarify what that looks like, especially when the money gets introduced, the resources get introduced later. You would be happy to make sure that those relationships were formalized early on. So then the core group, if we peel that onion and go deeper into the nesting doll, who is forming that particular core group that does all the work we just described? Well, the coalition of the willing. That's either the same group of people or a different group of people who steps in and sort of put their name, put their political capital, put their own resources online to make it all happen. And who, can you click one more time, Dave? The coalition of the willing comes together around shared values. Those values may be explicit or not. They may need to spend some time really understanding that and connect their individual values around that particular purpose for the system to be built. They have shared interests. And the key here is to know what they are. If you're not clear, if they're not articulated, it's really hard to move to the next level. And then not only knowing that you need to share power, but actually being okay with that and knowing how to do it with one another when not one individual in particular claims the ownership or positions themselves in a particular power way. So the coalition of the willing comes together and works on those three elements. Then those three elements serve them as a guide for building the leadership team or core group. If we peel it back one more layer, what does it look like within each of those shared interests, shared values, and shared power elements? You can see some of the concepts being discovered and explained by the participants. And if you click one more time, Dave, the collaborators, the agency, and the many faces, if you will, represent the who within this particular work. So the collaborators is a term that I'm using to suggest that individuals who are part of the coalition of the willing are collaborating, they respect each other, they know how to build consensus with one another, and they continue to co-create. They represent different people, so it's not one person. And many faces showing up in the system internally for the core group and others, and externally to the external world, what makes them so powerful. By sharing power, by being different faces to different audiences, they're able to model shared leadership. They are able to maneuver within themselves and others, the power dynamics, and they're really all relying on relationships, the relational power element that helps them sustain that whole shared power element together as a group. And of course, on the shared interest, why they have shared interest? Because they're dealing with the same issues. They have self-interest as part of that conversation as well. It doesn't go away. People, no matter how selfless we are, we still have interest in something. So being clear what that self-interest is and how you're going to feed that is important. And then there's conflicting interest. So here's the agency, meaning that there is either an outside agency who serves as a funder, perhaps, or an internal agency who serves as the primary idea holder that continues to balance their own, but also other members of Coalition of the Willing self and conflicting interests. It needs to be known, it's not going to go away, it's there. It's a matter of making sure that you balance it out and bring them back together to the same issue that we're here to face or to solve. So then it leads us to that final inviting to collaborate level 2, with the who being the we, one or multiple individuals coming together and convening, connecting, and providing that compelling message. So if you click on that, Dave, you will see the work of leadership at that level happens in those 3 dimensions. And who is doing the work is the we. And at this particular moment in time, like I said, it doesn't have to be multiple faces, it could be one. And if you're gifted one and can do those things well, connect, convene, and compel message, God bless you. Most people are not. So it takes a special individual who can be all 3. That's why we continue to seek partners, right, who can complement us. If I'm really good at convening, but boy, I suck at communication, I better find somebody who I have shared interest with whom I can share power with, I trust enough, and he or she can be that partner in delivering the message or connecting the dots. Connecting the dots means 2 things. Connecting to the bigger picture, understanding how systems work and connect, but also connecting resources and ideas within the group. So in the middle, you see the we showing up right now. And then let's go and look at the characteristics of the 3 elements: connecting, compelling, and convening. You can see that the complexity continues to grow. What are some activities that are involved in those 3 different dimensions? The convener works primarily on choosing the right people, inviting to collaborate, and sharing ownership. The convener often serves as a voice when people come together. The next person, or I would say the next side of the same person, is a connector, if we're talking about one individual. That person understands the needs, being able to see the needs, building connections, and showing the commitment, making sure that people who are brought together are clear on how individual commitments connect so that we can craft that shared message. And then the final element is the communicator. Communicator is the one who is able to make the case, influence buy-in, and gain credibility through their communication power. They're so good at selling that message that people are believing that it must be true. We can do it. So with that, at the very core of our leadership structure here is taking responsibility. And the people who do take responsibility in that system are humble, and they have a strong sense of cause. They are capable of systems thinking, and they're curious, and they're also courageous and hardworking. So those are competencies. Now we're moving into competencies discussion that are necessary for individuals to launch or build a system like that, but also that we will be looking for in those we invite to be part of it. Because as you remember, it's not a linear process. In the end, everybody in the system we're building, we would like to have, we should be able to help develop those competencies if they're not currently in presence. So one more time, let's take a look at it from the bigger picture. You see those 4 levels now, and you can zero in on what's in the middle, the idea holder, and how it goes from there into the bigger, observable, what we can actually notice, read about system. If you can click on that one more time, Dave, and continue, you can see the idea holder builds the we, or positions themselves as the we. They build a coalition of the willing, continue to work on sharing power, interest, and voice. They bring the core group together, and that core group serves as a leadership team that then supports the people who hold the system together. That's how leadership occurs in a loosely coupled system. So with that, let's go back to the summary where we started. And remembering that in the multi-stakeholder, loosely coupled system, we act as a living organism. So if we can change our view of organizations to an open system, a breathing, living, biological organism where people move, where we continue to exchange resources, ideas internally and externally. Now we can see that leadership happens at 4 different levels in those 4 different dimensions that need to be clarified, identified, articulated, and explicitly taken in account when we are developing our processes, structures, and act in a certain way. So with that, I'm going to pause for a second, let you gather your thoughts, see if you have any questions you want to share in our chat. And we're almost ready with some key takeaways. And those key takeaways are my takeaways from the research. I would love to continue this conversation with you now and in the future to build on what has been currently discovered. So, looking at some of the key takeaways for me personally, why leadership in loosely coupled system looks different. There's a few elements there that I'd like to share. One of them, if you can click, Dave, is serving the purpose versus following the leader. So when you think about individuals in your systems, in your organizations, are you hoping as a leader that they follow you? Or are you building relationships and your structures so that people invited to be part of it can serve the purpose? So think of that purpose as being our heart of the system, back to the 3 brains. If the purpose is the heart of the system, that means that we need to be inviting people. If you're part of the coalition, if you identify yourself as the coalition of the willing type of leader, then the passion is what fuels that system's energy. We need to find people who have the passion for the work we're asking them to commit to or to be part of. We also need to make sure that their personal connection to the worthy cause or the idea, it's hard sometimes. And I think where it's hard is when we feel we're failing because we don't have expertise. So we start inviting people with expertise, but with no passion or no personal connection to the worthy cause. So maybe not realistic in some cases, but I think doable in terms of waking up that passion, in terms of helping people see the connection. And one of our favorites, David said we will talk about Simon Sinek, is right here to help us out, right? So we can definitely make sure that people in our organizations care for what the organization is designed to do. Because we know that working hard for something we love will keep us in the system and will help us see the bigger picture and serve that purpose. So the next key takeaway is that whole concept that we are volunteers, so we have the power of walking away. And sometimes I would say that the organizational relationship might not allow a person to walk away. So let's say in the coalition, we have formal partnerships now, we're 10 years old, we have let's say a government agency or a healthcare provider who has signed on to be a partner, maybe even contributes, has that commitment. But the individual may not represent in that particular stakeholder. So walking away physically is one thing, walking away mentally is another thing, right? So not being interested. I was told to be here, but I really don't need to be here. So since people have that power of walking away or disengaging physically or mentally, we know we need to do something different. We can't accept them to actually follow a directive. So with that, I would suggest we're looking at the gut. So what would hold the system together in this case is probably the relationships that you can build. They may not have connection to the cause or passion around the issue you're trying to solve. But if they can be friends with people who are part of that cause, that would be that way of keeping them at the table and engaged. So really focusing on building trust in relationship, maintaining a healthy ecosystem of partners. Sometimes tough decisions need to be made in terms of losing a partner if it means we take the thorn out of our body, right? If an individual is toxic to the entire group, maybe it's time to separate and let go of that partner rather than to keep them at the table and not let the rest of the system be healthy. And of course, it's important that we continue to focus on building trust in the system itself. So the system's integrity is what sometimes makes that happen for individuals who may not trust individuals personally, but they have enough trust in the system and they will stay. And then here's a quote from Stephen Covey on trust is the glue. So if we think of trust as the glue of life, or like I said earlier, the currency that we need to continue to build, then I think we have a chance to sustain loosely coupled system in a healthy way. And then final key takeaway is when the system becomes the whole, let's say we got there. We now have a system that people trust, and we have a core group that is working well at engaging, sustaining that system, and continue to evolve the structure of it. So now it's the who in itself. And I said, I observed a couple of situations where it could become very logical, right? The left or the right brain takes over. So that's the balance in chaos and order that becomes so critical here. So thinking of the system in itself now is the brain. The processes are established, the structures, the policies, the formal agreements are there. So how do we make that flexible enough so it doesn't get stuck and doesn't get stuck in serving itself? So information and decision-making process needs to be transparent, allowing for diversity and for dissent voice. Actually, you want to encourage people to criticize and to continue to improve and challenge how we do things. And we also want to make sure that we check our biases at every step of the way. And it only happens when we expose ourselves, right? And we can invite somebody else's outside, if you will, perspective to share with us what they're observing. So I think in many cases that happens through evaluation processes, and sometimes we get to them too late. It also might happen with new members coming in and beginning to bring new ideas. So pay attention how you encourage those new ideas to emerge. Are you maybe not knowing that, discouraging those new voices from sharing what they're observing because they may be too afraid to share at some point? And you need to be able to rely on those who can see bigger picture. Not everybody can. And many of us get stuck in day-to-day stuff and not able, for whatever reason, capacity is one, but time is another, not able to constantly keep the bigger picture. So it might be that there is a role or an intentionality, a discipline approach to always bring it to a bigger picture. So we are not stuck in that one problem. How do we sustain ourselves? And continue to think about our purpose and sustainability question is only relevant if we continue to advance the bigger picture, the bigger cause. So new leadership competencies. What is necessary for people to take responsibility within that type of system? And I just want to preface it by saying at different times, not necessarily once you step into a leadership responsibility role, it doesn't mean you have to be there. It means that you're taking responsibility for something for some period of time. And if everybody else in your core group, coalition of the willing, and hopefully the rest of the system feels the same way, then we can sustain it for a very, very long period of time. But relying on a few is not going to help it. So leadership competencies that are emerging from this particular new way of thinking of leadership are, Dave, next slide. Oh, that's right. Management versus leadership first. So how do we inspire? Well, leadership is about inspiring people to do things they never thought they could. So what do we need to make that happen? Those are the competencies. And I would like you to exercise your annotate feature here in Zoom and see which one of those competencies you personally feel that you have and which ones you don't. Dave, can you explain how to use annotate?
Gladly. So those of you joining us via computer, if you're on your phone, it's a little bit harder to do this, but for those at the computer, along the top of your screen, you'll see the green bar where it says you're viewing Dave Clausen's screen. Just to the right of that, you can drop down a menu, and that's where you'll see the annotate button. When you click annotate, you'll get a menu that will pop up across your screen. We want you to use the stamp option. When you click that, you can choose a check mark, a question mark, an X, a heart, and go ahead and use the annotate, grab a check. And that's what we'll use this first round. All right, seeing some check marks and some hearts. I like it. All right, Irina, would you repeat the question? I got a couple of messages in the chat. What do you want them to mark?
Awesome. So you're marking with a check mark, I hope, and hearts what you feel you have, competencies, those competencies that you have, and cross. It looks like star might represent what you also have. Why don't you choose something else like a question mark or a red cross next to those competencies that you feel you don't have or you need development? That's cool. So we can see as a collective group of leaders in that space of prevention, coalitions, we have looks like really good sense of collaboration tools and skills, developing leaders and teams, coordination, communication, not so much change management. Some challenges maybe with managing power dynamics in general at the higher level, forming a core group. Nice. So you can see we are, for the most part, I don't see anything that doesn't have at least one check mark to it, right? So we are well-rounded group, and we definitely can tap into each other's wisdom and knowledge to help fill in the gaps. Yeah, the biggest one that I'm picking up here is managing power dynamics, and I'm curious about that as well as change management skills. Since this is a webinar and not an interactive session, which will be much better because we will be doing that next, right, Dave? We'll leave it at that and then open for questions. Oh, did you take a snapshot of it?
Oh, I didn't. We'll do it again during the roundtable. All right, folks. So I'm going to go ahead and set it up so you can come off of mute. We did have one question, Irina, in the chat box a little bit earlier about the trilateral leadership ledger as a source for some of the outcomes. Just curious if you used it in any part or referred to it throughout your research.
No, did not. And this is the first time I'm hearing about it. So thank you. I'll have to look into it.
All right. So y'all can come off of mute. You can raise your hand if you want. We would love to hear from you. And it does look like you saw the comment from Nicole. Yes, it is a lot of wonderful information and really makes you think about the work that we do as prevention leaders. Absolutely.
And thank you, Nicole. You probably saw that about a third of those sites were coalitions. So it's no surprise to you, I'm sure, that those who have been doing the coalition work for some time and were able to share how they did it and how they were able to build their coalitions, that's where this all emerged. all the findings are from that sphere.
All right. So Nicole, I see your hands up. Go ahead, come off of mute. What you got for
Sure.
us?
I just wanted to throw my voice in for a minute, maybe to open the door for some other people to throw their voice in too. This research is amazing. And the whole time I kept thinking about coalitions. I kept thinking about, and broader than that, work and prevention. Almost everything we do requires collaboration. Even if you're an agency and you're having to collaborate with a school or a YMCA or a church to like provide your service, like this is just so helpful. And I just want to learn more. So I'm like, wow, if we're able to figure out how to be so much more effective, the work of what coalitions can accomplish is just amazing. So I really, really look forward to. I realize Hugh Life is already doing this, but like really taking your research and putting it into practice in the field, because there are so many passionate people who are struggling as a single director doing all the work. And like the system you described is so beautiful. And I'm just like, if we can get people, in this loosely coupled system, which I'd never even heard that term before. I really like it. I learned a new phrase. I see great, great potential for accomplishing amazing work. So I'm so glad you had this interest. I look forward to applying this knowledge in my own work in the training and TA that I provide myself.
Great. Thank you so much, Nicole. Absolutely. And I wanted to add to your comment, when I finished, it's one of those things, once you see something, you can't unsee it. So once I finished, everywhere I look, I see leadership happening differently in community organizing work, in trade associations, ironically, or maybe not, in startups, right? IT companies. I mean, where younger generation actually has that way of being a little bit more so established than the older generation might have. And so you see them organizing that way, and you see how they share leadership and power right away. And it's beautiful to watch. And then they get to some point, and it's like our old way of thinking and how it's supposed to be. We squash it early, too soon. Anything else in chat, Dave, that you're picking up? Any other questions or comments?
Our friend Ben shared the title of the book where he pulled the Trilateral Leadership Ledger from. So I copied that. I'm going to be looking that up over my lunch break.
Great. Thank you, Ben.
Yes, indeed. All right. Got some private messages saying this was amazing. Oh, I've got to go to another meeting. I can't wait to catch up on the recording. Yes, it is a lot of great information. Myself, I want to watch the recording and just digest and just sit with this and really wrap my head around it and wrap my heart around it. Try to engage at least two of those brains.
Absolutely. And it is fresh off the press, you guys. It was just completed in May, right? So it's still very new. And I would be happy to share the full dissertation. I mean, it's a lot to read, but if you're interested, then you probably might be able to pick up some additional things there. But shall we go into the future steps, Dave? What we're thinking about in terms of rolling it out?
Yeah, we've got another slide before that first, really talking about learning experiences. I know we've got a lot of folks from our PTTC region on the line with us, but y'all have started to really experience learning in a new way. And I'll let you touch on these, Irina.
Yeah, one of the things that we've been doing as a Hugh Life team, as you mentioned, Nicole, kind of already noticed in that we are trying to practice what we are learning about how groups form and how leadership happens. As we are doing it, think of Hugh Life as a laboratory. We ourselves are experimenting within ourselves. And as we do, we're developing these different learning experiences. We're piloting them with groups. If it sticks, if it works, great, then we can scale it up and continue to promote and develop further. But if it doesn't, we drop it. It didn't work. It's not exactly how things happen. So currently, we kind of have those five categories, something around assessment, really helping people assess where they're at on their journey, whether in the development stage of their organization or capacity or understanding their current reality so they can see the need, right? So how do we help people see the need? And not necessarily that person who started the whole thing, they did see the need. They're natural at it. That's why they're doing it. But individuals we're trying to bring in, how do we help them see the need? How that need connects to who they are and what they want to do and how they're going to get engaged. This whole model in itself will become an assessment tool, helping coalitions or other loosely coupled organizations understand where they're strong and weak, like what is out of balance. This whole triangle has to be in balance. If one element is missing, we might be experiencing some challenges there. Then the second category is all about inclusive engagement, and that's where most of our work is to help people facilitate those engagement events, right? So the facilitation training falls into this category. Anything that we can do to help through templates, through processes and methods that are learnable, that if we can get away from thinking that that work is only possible when you have a natural skill to facilitate, wrong. We all can learn that skill. So we will be focusing on developing more of those learning experiences to help people develop facilitation and engagement skills. The next one is about innovation. That is where the change management, frankly, the competency around being able to create an environment for innovation means that things will change. And sometimes we're too comfortable in holding on to stable things in our life that we just don't go there. So developing options for our groups and for ourselves, how do we continue to innovate in that change is going to be constant, right? So we need to learn how to bring new people on board. That's change. We need to learn how when partners shift, and we need to bring a whole new organizational partner on board. That's change. Learn where the resources come from. That's change. Learn the kind of technology we're using. So all of those different ways of achieving our purpose is all about innovative approaches. The strategic thinking category is a little bit more complex. That is about developing our capacity to see the bigger picture, to understand not only our own need, but also how we fit within the bigger scope of things. Whole systems, critical thinking comes into play here. And then the final one is planning. It's all great. Thinking is good. We hopefully can be innovative in terms of our idea generation. We might be able to engage people in good discussions. But if we don't know how to plan and evaluate on that particular plan, that's also going to be hard to continue to serve the purpose. So developing action plans, developing implementation plans, and evaluation measures is the category under planning, implementation, and evaluation. So just FYI, there are certain things already exist, but it's going to continue to grow as far as I'm concerned in terms of being able to expand on those different ways of learning or different learning experiences. Thank you, Dave, for letting me talk about that.
All right, so here it is. What's next? Today was just it was a lot of information, but it was just a teaser, really, to start this conversation around leadership and loosely coupled multi-stakeholder systems. And yes, I may be practicing saying that in the mirror in the mornings. But what's next is let's continue to dive deeper into those nesting dolls. We want to have a roundtable to invite some folks, some coalition leaders that are leading in the loosely coupled multi-stakeholder systems, and give y'all a chance to hear from them, to talk with them. Around that inclusive engagement, we want to have a conversation. And just real quick, too, in the chat box, are y'all interested in a roundtable? Y'all gonna want to join us for that? What are we looking at as far as interest there? I want to have some conversation with some of these leaders. Absolutely. I love it. All right. All right. And if you look at the slide, continuing on this journey, we've got that round table, and then we'll go even deeper into a workshop, really bringing the nuts and bolts, the how to bring this back to your community, your coalition, your organization. And building on that is a nice, long, in-depth academy, really rolling up our sleeves and getting to work, putting the loosely coupled system together. And Gotta finish off with that alumni community of practice because together is better. The more we come together and support each other, even if we're from completely different systems, states, agencies, areas, there's going to be so much power and wisdom in that community of practice. I'm getting fired up. I'm going to go off on a rant, so I'm going to hit pause right there and just say prevention is better together, and together we are stronger. So that's the future. That's what we're wanting to bring you and build together. And I'm catching up on the chat box, seeing all the yeses. I'm feeling some good energy. Are you feeling it, Arena?
I am definitely feeling that. I would love to know also who would be interested in being part of the roundtable, because it will be hard to have a conversation with 30 people, right? So we'll be looking for some participants who will be engaged in the conversation, and then the rest of us will be more of the observants, and then just feeding questions and comments for the roundtable participants to mold over.
There might be a few folks here today. I won't call you out, but you might get a little invitation to join us for this roundtable. All right. Well, with that, we're just a few minutes early, which means you've got time for more questions. Any kind of final thoughts, final takeaways you'd like to share with the group?
Is this question for all of us, Dave?
Yes,
Awesome.
indeed. It's for everybody. Any final thoughts? What do y'all think? I see a few of your faces are in deep thought right now. All right. And we do have a comment in the chat box real quick. Arena, do you see it? Or you would like me to read it to you?
I did see it. And then there's a question for Irina, ...
There it comes.
Is it coming?
There it is. Did most of your information come from St. Thomas?
Most of my information. I wonder which kind of information.
Well, I guess overall, was it to do with what you were studying, your doctorate and so on? Did a lot have to do with the university itself, or did you get it from a lot of outside sources and collectively put it together for your presentation today?
Yes, thank you very much for that clarification. The 15 systems that I looked at were not St. Thomas affiliated.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, several of them were coalitions. And quite frankly, some of these people are here on the call who participated.
Cool.
And a majority of them were around health sector, right? So it's either prevention with coalition work, or it was around, for example, one was specifically in Wisconsin focused on child mortality rates, right? So a lot of these systems are designed around a very, tight issue.
Sure.
Several were about economic development, some were about housing. So those types of, one was about land use. One was about bringing technology to cities. And so there was a whole consortium of different businesses coming together. They called themselves an alliance, that they wanted to transform how their local government in Colorado was implementing, digital way of, for the sake of transparency and for the sake of efficiency. They wanted to make sure that their local government in Colorado implements these technologies. So they formed the consortium. So different purposes in different types of sectors around a variety of issues, but primarily healthcare related.
Very interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Yes. Big issues, big topics that are very dynamic and multifaceted. Hence why it takes a multi-stakeholder system to make a difference and impact. All right. Well, I won't keep y'all any longer. Thank you very much for joining us. And big shout out, big thank you to Arena for doing the work, packaging the work, and bringing the work and sharing it with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you for hosting, Dave, and PTTC and Mid-America PTTC and ACT Missouri. You guys have been awesome partners. And for all of you guys, I'm just admiring what you do, and anything we can do to continue to support the work, we're there for you. So thank you very much for doing the work you're doing. If not for you, it would be a better, if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be in this place. But I hope that you continue to do the work and we'll be in a better place.
Yes, indeed. All right. Well, with that, everybody have a wonderful, wonderful day and remainder of the week. Take care, everyone.